So the number one thing that comes to my mind when I think about people of color and psychedelics is the importance of a safe container. So if you're going to take psychedelics, it needs to be in a safe place. And we see this again and again through our research and our clinical experience that you need to be in a place. And this can be hard, especially like, let's say you're in a maybe you're in a low income neighborhood and you're hearing sirens outside your window, every hour, right? That doesn't feel safe, or if you're in a place where there's crime, that doesn't feel safe. But you can also be in an affluent neighborhood and not feel safe too. Like I could be going for a jog in my own neighborhood and someone's like, oh, do you belong here? Or the police pull up, right? So you have to be someplace you feel safe, and you have to be with people who feel safe.
I wanted to tell you that I had the privilege of taking a two-eyed seeing indigenous plant medicine course as well as psychedelics course and at UBC. And it was just like a 4 month course, but it gave me so much insight on mystical experiences and cultural trauma from different regions of the world. And I feel like after seeing that, I was really, really interested in exploring the University of Ottawa course that you have released, and there was this consciousness and psychedelics, and the consciousness piece was just so intriguing to me because nobody's teaching that. So, how did you come about that? Is it because of the experiences that you saw of the participants?
Yeah, yes, because I think we felt that the consciousness is such an important piece of um, of this, and if we're going to look at it seriously as a real discipline for
Hmm.
study, it can't just be about these drugs. It also has to be about the effects that it has on people and why. And so the consciousness sort of is a natural extension of the study of psychedelics in a more, I think, formal way.
Amazing. I hope to take that course one day.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's great you're getting your degree, you're getting your master's now, and then when
mhm.
you're done, come over to U Ottawa and take some of our psychedelic stuff.
Yes. Uh, yeah, that's the goal. I want to ask you about, so you've spoken a lot about how microaggressions can compound to trauma. And so how do they show up in a psychedelic therapy setting? And how can therapists avoid causing harm in those settings?
Yeah, so this is unfortunately it's a big problem, and it's not just a problem in psychedelic therapy, it's a problem in therapy in general. But the
Hmm.
problem is it's a bigger problem in psychedelic therapy because when you're working with somebody who may be in a non-ordinary state of consciousness, they're not they don't necessarily have all their normal defenses that they walk around with to protect themselves from racism,
Yeah.
and so they're very vulnerable, and you know experiencing racism, no matter how small, it's going to be wounding. So of course, as a clinician, you don't want to cause harm to people that you're there to support. And so it's so
Hmm.
important that therapists don't do microaggressions. And we know one of the main drivers of microaggressions is implicit bias,
Hmm.
which means people, when they may have biases and racism in ways that they might not even be consciously aware of. And so this requires people to basically do their own work and understand themselves better, understand their own biases, and ask themselves hard questions, so that they can show up for their clients in a way that is as unbiased as possible. And certainly we all have biases, and it's a lifelong struggle to reduce them. But if you work on them, I do firmly believe you can work on them well enough so that you're not causing harm for your clients. But if you have not worked on them, I guarantee you're causing harm to your clients of color if you have done no
Yes.
work on your biases.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Now, if you want to support and become part of the psychedelic movement, feel free to donate to MAPS Canada at the link in the description below. Thank you for helping our mission to support equitable access to legal and regulated psychedelic medicines for all Canadians.
I want to ask you about, so I want to ask you about your book, but before that, I just want to ask you, what specific training do you believe should be required for psychedelic therapists working with BIPOC population, other than educating themselves about the person's culture or something like, the gods or something will pop up?
Right.
What else is
Yeah.
there?
Well, I mean, actually, that's what people used to do in terms of, like cultural competence used to be like, oh, I'm going to learn a little bit about each culture.
Mm,
And that only goes so far. First of all, there's so many cultures, you can't learn about all of them anyway. Although you should learn something about the ones that are in your community, the people that you
yes.
see, right?
Yeah.
But that's only going to take you so far, because what you really need is what we call cultural humility. And that's the ability to acknowledge that you don't know what you don't know, and that you're going to be humble enough to go learn more about it as you need it,
Mm,
and that you're going to be humble enough to admit that you've made mistakes, and that you're
yeah.
going to be able to make repair with your client when you do make a mistake, that they can come and tell you, hey, that was a microaggression. And rather than get defensive or hide in shame, you're going to say, oh, wow, you know what, I'm really sorry. um, can you tell me what I did that was hurtful and why? Because I
Mm,
don't want to do that again to you or anyone else. So thank
mm,
you for sharing that. Right.
mhm.
Um, and how much nicer would the world be if people actually did that? I'm just telling you
Yeah.
that almost never happens, but it needs to happen, because that's what's going to save your relationship with your client, um, when you do make mistakes.
Yeah. And help them feel better.
Exactly.
Um, yeah. Um, What gives you hope or concern about the rapid commercialization of psychedelics? Like we can see that it was sort of like ending in 80s, and then now from the 2020s, I would say, like it's just on and on. It's just everybody's talking about it and the media is talking about it. So are you concerned or are you hopeful, or is it a mix of both?
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe, my opinion on this, it probably differs from most people, but I don't think psychedelics should be commercialized. I don't think that people should be profiting on them, because
Oh, for
we've
sure. Yeah.
we've already seen what happens when people profit off of drugs.
Hmm.
It creates situations where these substances aren't being used in the best interests of the people who need them, because money and profits are being put first. And anytime you put money first, you're not putting people first. And so, if you look at indigenous traditions around psychedelics, it was never for profit or for money making. They were used by indigenous healers. Maybe you would give a donation or a reasonable fee for their service, but it was never for profiteering. And
Yeah.
I think, when we go down that road, we're setting ourselves up for problems. And I
Hmm.
I unfortunately think that's how it's going to go. I hope it doesn't, but I don't see any good end coming that way.
Yeah, yeah. And especially, I think I fear synthetic psychedelics a lot because that is another way to use, like, make money off of it and capitalize off of it because fungus and mescaline or like it's just plants.
Right.
Ayahuasca is just plant medicine. And then now people are synthesizing it and like charging so many hundreds of dollars for it. Um, yeah, it's a lot. And especially like we know the socioeconomic status and how people of color and Black people and Indigenous people are always struggling, like compared to the white people who have the power, who have money, and who are able to access this medicine easily. So, um, yeah, the commercialization, I feel like it's also going to affect BIPOC people disproportionately.
Right. And I think the worst thing that can happen is if, these synthetic drugs are made legal, but they're super expensive, and the natural
Yeah,
ones remain illegal. Um,
exactly.
and then,
Exactly.
you have a situation where, uh, the people who most need it don't have access. Right.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to talk about your book. You've written this book called A
Yeah.
Clinician's Guide to Healing the Wounds of Racial Trauma, a 12-session CBT-based protocol. I want to start by asking, like, what inspired you to write? This is like a manual, which you can give out to people, but like, um, yeah, what inspired you to write this?
Yes. So I think, well, I was asked to write a book on racial trauma many years ago through one of my professional associations that I'm a part of. Um, it's called ABCT. And they wanted me to write something about this. And I was really hesitant because, first of all, the research really wasn't there yet. And
Mm,
also because I was worried that clinicians were going to go and, they're going to say, okay, well, I read that book. Now I know how to treat racial trauma, but not have done their own work and then actually cause more,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
we know a lot of clinicians, they just like to collect certificates. And it's like, yeah, I have, the ACT certificate or, you know, uh, behavior activation certificate or, safe space certificate or whatever. And then it's like they can do it, but it requires this piece that I mentioned before where you do your own work and you cultivate cultural
Hmm.
humility before you dive into this. So I didn't so I said no, I wouldn't write that. Instead I wrote a book on microaggressions. You can buy it. It's out there. It's a very good book. Um but what happened is then over time I started I was asked more and more to give talks on treating racial trauma, and I would give tips on treating racial trauma. But I saw there was really a need for a whole protocol. And I think after the whole George Floyd
Mm,
situation happened, we had students basically calling the psychology department who were traumatized, having seen what they saw on TV, especially the Black students. And
yeah.
they were wanting help for their racial trauma, and there was nothing. And so we ran some informal groups for them, but I realized, yeah, we need to make something available. There has to be
Hmm.
some way to help people, and the therapists, they don't know how to do it. So
Mm,
um, that's why I wrote the manual, so that therapists could learn how to treat racial trauma and help people who have racial trauma. And I just decided I was going to make the whole first part of the manual the self work. Like, are you ready to do this work? Right? Make
mm,
sure that you can do these 10 really hard things before you dive into trying to help somebody with racial trauma, because again, we don't want to re-traumatize them with the therapist's own racism. So you keep a lid on that, and then
mm.
here's the protocol. And so that's what this is. And I also needed to write it up anyway because I want to, like a good scientist, we want to test our treatments. And so all of the
Mhm.
techniques in the manual, each technique has research support behind it that it reduces racial trauma. But this
Oh,
is the first time, like, all the techniques, different techniques, are put together into one manual. And now we want to look at how that whole thing together, how effective that is. So we're doing a research study on that now, where we're giving the 12 session protocol to people of color with racial trauma and
mm.
measuring their symptoms before and after, so that we can document how well it works, and then also so we can continue to improve and refine it. So that's what that
Wow,
book's about.
that's amazing. And do you think there is an equal version of the 12 session psychodynamic? But I think it needs to be more sessions if it's a psychodynamic perspective. Uh,
Yeah.
but do you think there's something like that, or would you
Mm.
be writing that? Like, but I think you're trained in CBT.
Yeah, that's why I did a CBT manual. But
Hmm.
I think there definitely would be room to have a psychodynamic approach as well. It would look very different. And I'm going to just leave that for somebody else to do. But they can use my book as a reference and make their psychodynamic version.
Sounds good. You were emphasizing in the book about helping clients diffuse from shame and self-blame and build a stronger ethno-racial identity. Because even I see that a lot of people, a lot of Indian people that I meet sometimes who are second generation or third generation have completely lost touch with, or like are sort of, they feel like somehow low if they acknowledge that they are Indian. They want to be more, you know, um, like not identify as an Indian. And there's so much trauma behind it. And initially, I used to get angry, and now I'm just like, oh, you poor thing, because you're hiding your identity and you're feeling shame about it. So this thing really resonated with me. And again, like this is what I read about your book, and I can't get my hands, like I can't wait to get my hands on your book. Um, but yeah, I want to speak about that. Like, why did
Yes.
you write that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's really unfortunately common, when your whole cultural group has been colonized, or in my case
Hmm.
enslaved, right?
Yes.
and then you are constantly like fed the narrative from the dominant culture, right, from the conquering group, their superiority, your inferiority. you know it's hard not to take that in at some level, and so that's why so many people end up feeling ashamed of their cultural group, because maybe that's the only narrative that they've heard, and it's really important, especially for parents, to instill positive messages in their children about their heritage. Because if
Hmm.
you don't, very consciously do that, then, all of the negative messages in society that, that support the primacy of white people and white culture, that's what you end up digesting. And you don't even
Yeah.
have to work at it. It's in the air. You just breathe it in, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
so you have to have your own strategy for reminding yourself of the strengths and the positive aspects of your own culture. Every culture has strengths and positive aspects and things to be proud of. And so
Hmm.
it may be that you have to go and find out what those things are and learn about them so that you can have pride in your cultural group. But that's so important for your sense of well-being and self-esteem,
Yeah.
to have pride in your group. So,
Yeah. Thank you
mm,
for that answer. Um, You also include strategies not only for healing, but for empowering clients, like to push back against racism and be a force of change, a force for change. I love this so much but at the same time, I was a little conflicted when I was reading it because I feel like as people of color and and Black and Indigenous people, we are the one who need to do so much work to teach the white people that what is
yes,
going on. And I feel like we're already dealing with the racism, and then on top of that, we need to teach other people that you're being racist to me. Like it's just so and I am that person who wants to be a force for change. I really want to deal with it, but it's so exhausting. Um and so I wanted to ask about this conflict.
yeah,
Um
yeah. No, then this is a fair point, because you're right. I mean, it isn't fair, right? That we're the ones experiencing the racism, and then we have to go out and educate the people who are doing it to get them to stop. Really, it's their problem. They should stop. They should educate themselves, right? And
yeah.
stop doing the racist stuff. But unfortunately, I think if we wait for that to happen on its own, we're going to be waiting a really long time. So,
Yeah.
just practically speaking, um, but the reason that actually this became a key pillar of the healing process, this came out of the groups. We developed a racial trauma healing group for veterans. And what we found in the group is, as the veterans move through these different stages of healing, they started on their own doing things in their communities to make their communities better in many different ways.
Mm,
And we kind of call this activism broadly, but it doesn't necessarily mean going and holding up a sign, although that could. But it's
mm,
just anything people do to make their environment a better place,
mm,
and to reduce the racism in their environment. And so we saw the veterans doing this in all kinds of different ways. In some ways, that was, advocating that a group that flew the Confederate flag wouldn't be part of a veterans parade, right? Or in some cases, it meant reclaiming their voice, like just leaving a hotel where they were treated badly, or in one case, it was even
mm,
moving out of a neighborhood where they were mistreated. So there were lots of different things that they were doing to bring about change in their own lives, and
mhm,
to help other people. And it seemed like, yeah, and it was like such an important sort of, I don't know, piece of the process
mm.
that we ended up including it as the as a key feature at the end of the healing, that people would take what they've learned and give it back to others, and use it as a way for other people who've also suffered to heal. And that seems to, yeah, resonate a lot with, the people who've suffered from racial trauma. When they get better, they
Yeah,
they want to help others.
yeah, yeah. Wow, thank you so much. In one of the podcasts that I was listening to your podcasts, You were speaking about how when you were interested in OCD research, but when you brought this up that you wanted to do race research and like racial trauma, you were told, what were you told? I want you to tell the story.
Yeah, this was when I was a graduate student.
Hmm.
I actually went to graduate school because I was interested in studying OCD,
Hmm.
uh, not uh, trauma or psychedelics or racism or anything. I just wanted to study OCD, which is very fascinating. I actually have more publications on OCD than anything else. But what
Oh.
I found when I started to study it was that the measures that we had been using to collect data and to understand the disorder in people were not effective. They weren't effective in Black people. Like they didn't work. Um, there was problems. There were problems with the way that the questions were interpreted and answered that varied culturally. And I just thought to myself, oh my God, we're doing all this work, all this important research, and we're using measures that are not effective even for people in my own community. Like that could lead to misdiagnosis, over or under diagnosing people with problems that they do or don't have. um, and so I did my master's thesis and my dissertation on psychometrics for measures of OCD and anxiety related disorders. And I won't bore you with the details of that because whenever
No, I would love the details, but
when I talk about psychometrics, I can tell my friends their eyes glaze over. So I'm not going to go there more. But you can read my papers. And
yeah.
and so that was kind of how I started thinking about, oh wow, there's all these different ways in our field where we're not serving people of color, whether it's because we don't understand, problems like racism, or because we're not properly measuring their distress or their symptoms. And
Hmm.
so this is how I started to get more interested in mental health disparities broadly, and specifically in terms of communities of color.
Wow. I also wanted to ask you about if you have like one message for BIPOC people about the importance of psychedelics and the properties, the healing properties of psychedelics, what would you tell them? And especially people who are struggling right now.
Hmm. Yeah. So the number one thing that comes to my mind when I think about people of color and psychedelics is the importance of a safe container. So if you're
Mm,
going to take psychedelics, it needs to be in a safe place. And we see this again and again through our research and our clinical experience,
mm,
that you need to be in a place. And this can be hard, especially like, let's say maybe you're in a low income neighborhood, and you're hearing sirens outside your window, every hour, right? That doesn't feel safe, or if you're in a place
yeah.
where there's crime, that doesn't feel safe. But you can also be in an affluent neighborhood and not feel safe too. Like I could be going for a jog in my own neighborhood and someone's like, oh, do you belong here? Or the police pull up, right? So you have to be someplace you feel safe, and you have to be with
Mm,
people who feel safe. And they could be loved ones. They have to be people who understand and appreciate racism, that aren't gonna do that to you. They could be therapists who get it.
mm,
But the container has to include safe place, safe people, and you have to be comfortable. So I would say those are the most important things for me that I've seen and learned. And
mm.
actually, this is going into a new research project that we're doing for
Oh.
people of color. We're actually doing some psychedelic. We're doing a psychedelic retreat in Jamaica for people of color
Mm,
to heal from racial trauma. And part of the reason to have it in Jamaica is for that safe container, right? I mean, certainly Jamaica, like every place, has problems too, but one of the problems isn't racism, right? So you're not going to
yeah.
have the same type of racism that we have in the States or Canada, in a place like Jamaica where most of the people are Black, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking to see if and how people can heal from racial trauma by having a plant medicine group experience in that
Hmm.
environment. And we're actually recruiting. So if people are interested in coming to Jamaica at the
Mm.
end of July to be part of that, they can reach out to me because we have some major subsidies due to some very generous donors who are supporting the research. So,
That
and you
sounds
can,
amazing.
yeah, and we'll have results next year. So to share.
Wow, that's wonderful. And this is also so great that you're doing this in Jamaica because, as you said, it's it needs to be in a place where people feel safe, and Jamaica has like no racism compared to where we are right now. Um, and it's also important because taking psychedelics and doing the journey and the integration afterwards and setting the intention beforehand, it's a process. It's not like a one-day thing. And also it opens the critical window period in your brain. And so if like there is racism right after you take psychedelics, it will impact you even harder than it would on a regular day. And even if it's after 2 days. And I think with psilocybin, the critical window period was 4 weeks, but that's how long they tested it. They didn't go
Mhm.
beyond that. And same with ketamine, I think it's 3 weeks, and with different psychedelics, it's different.
Yeah, and we know that people come back from these things and they go to work the next day, right?
Yeah,
They shouldn't.
exactly.
They shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is one nice thing too, because we keep them an extra day. It's just to make sure that they have
Yeah.
at least a little space afterwards. But I remember after my first ayahuasca experience, I got back from Costa Rica, and boy, everything just, all the daily hassles and family problems and stuff, it all just felt so magnified. I was so
Oh,
overwhelmed. It was weird because I was so happy to get home and see everybody, but then it was like, oh my gosh, I can't handle
yeah.
this. I literally
Yeah.
had to go to a hotel for 2 days
Oh, wow.
just to get back into my skin and
Yeah.
feel like I could deal with life again.
Wow. Yeah, it is really important. Neuroplasticity only works if we rest, and yeah, we need to
Exactly.
rest and sleep and eat. So
Exactly. Exactly. Give
yeah.
time for those new pathways to settle. You
Hmm.
know, you're gonna have all that nice neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, and making new pathways in the
Yeah.
brain. So, yeah, just give yourself some space to do that.
Yeah. Book a hotel room for
Yeah,
2 days.
exactly.
Um, well, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Before I let you go, I want to ask you, is there anything that you wanted to speak about that I haven't asked you yet?
Oh my goodness, we've covered so many things. I feel
Yeah.
like my brain has been drained, but
Oh, no.
I guess, well, I'm going to be at Psychedelic Science. I'm going to be doing one of the pre-conference workshops. So if people are interested, it's going to be for clinicians how to consider and utilize diversity, in your work with your clients and with psychedelics. And so that's
Mhm.
going to be fantastic. It's going to be me and one of my very favorite partners in crime, Matthew Skinta, and we're going to be doing that workshop together. So I encourage people to come for that, or if they just want to come and say hello, would love to hear from them.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you again. We are very grateful to have you on the MAPS podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for having me and drawing attention to this important work.
Yes, it is very important. Um, Thank you, Adab, and Namaste, and bye bye.
All right, bye now.
I'm David Bronner, Cosmic Engagement Officer, Dr. Bronner's board member of MAPS. Subscribe to MAPS Canada. Bam!